Hello, and thank you for purchasing TrackNTime. This video is to show how TrackNTime works on an iPad. This video assumes that you've already looked at the other video on using the Web Utility Administrator. You cannot use TrackNTime on your iPad until you put a project into the Web Utility Administrator. So if you have not done that, you may want to go back, review that video, and put in a project. My name is Karen Oberg. I'm the principal and owner of Oberg Research, and I'll be walking you through what TrackNTime looks like on an iPad during today's video. Now, the way I've set this up is I've taken screenshots of what it looks like on an iPad and uploaded it onto my computer. That is merely to show you what things look like. And so you'll actually see that there's these weird photo1.png and open with preview. That's because we're looking at a scan shot, a screen scan or a screenshot, and not the real thing. So just try to ignore that these .pngs at the top and open with preview. They're not going to exist on your iPad. Now, when you first tap on the TrackNTime icon, which must be on your iPad. If you've downloaded TrackNTime onto the app onto your laptop or your desktop computer, you need to sync your iPad to your desktop to iTunes and move the app to your iPad. So you've tapped your icon for TrackNTime, and this is the page you come to. We have a login, update projects, show log, email log and database, clear log. The first thing you're going to want to do is log in. You may be automatically logged in if this is your iPad and your email address, but if you lent the iPad to somebody and they have their own version of TrackNTime for their own projects, they can log in themselves. So for example, on my iPad I go back and forth between myself and the other half of Oberg Research, Heidi Karchner. She has her own login and her own projects, and I can go back and forth between our two. Now you see here that the Atlanta History project that we had gone through in the Web Utility Administrator video is not on here. There's this strange project called TSHM, which is a leftover from something else, but it's not here. So what I would need to do is hit Update Projects. Before I do that, what's here? The show log, email log, log and database, and clear log. These are only to be used if you need to contact support. This is so our support staff can see what you've been up to and help try to troubleshoot where you might have gone wrong. But these have nothing to do with exporting your tracks. So really just forget that they're there unless you need to call support. So we're going to assume that we clicked on Update Projects. When you click Update Projects, the project appears. Here's ATL History Museum or Atlanta History Museum, and Update Complete. And it lets you know and you hit OK. Now when you click on ATL History Museum, you get the elements that we had put into the Web Utility Administrator. And they're down the side here, and that's just to let you know that everything you put in the Web Utility Administrator shows up on the list here. Now you're ready to collect data. So what you do is you go down here. We have Home, Visitor Info, Element Info, Manage Tracks, and Map. Home was the pages we were just on. Click Visitor Info. That's going to be how you collect that demographic information as well as time information about your visitor that you're tracking. So you hit Visitor Info, go to New Visitor, which project are you working on? We would click Atlanta History Museum, and we are now set up for Atlanta History Museum. And you know that you are because your elements end up down the side here. Now this is for inoperative elements. The reason we have this here is for those museums and researchers that may be using this in an exhibit with a high amount of interactives. Interactives, particularly computer ones, can break easier than others, and they sometimes become inoperative. but they may become inoperative between the morning of data collection and the afternoon of data collection. And so what we did here is you can mark that something is inoperative. In that way, when you look at your data and you realize, wow, in the morning 20 people went to interactive A, but in the afternoon nobody went to interactive A, you don't have to start searching to figure out what happened to interactive A. You know that interactive A was actually inoperative. Now back over to visitor info. We have the date, the crowd level, some exhibit elements. These are not customizable. Museum events is, if you tap it, you get the keyboard. And then visitor characteristics. The time they entered, the time they exit, which you do at the very, very end, so don't forget to go back. Their age, their gender, their ethnicity, which is typing, and additional notes, which is also typing. We have had questions about ethnicity being customizable. We certainly can do that, but that's an extra project that we would need to work out with a particular museum or researcher. So now what we have is we filled in some of this data. The date pops up automatically, the crowd level's low that day, there's some discovery carts in there. There's no museum event going on. Museum event might be something like there's a family day, so you might have an inordinate number of families compared to normal. Or perhaps it's a free Saturday, or it's it's the opposite end, it's a special day for senior centers to come in, that sort of thing. Visitor characteristics, the time they entered. If you tap this button, a clock pops up and you just hit yes, and you get the time. You don't have to type that in. Their age, their gender, ethnicity I decided not to put in here, and additional notes. The other key information here is that you might want to know who your visitor is with. You can only track one person at a time if that's your unit of analysis, but you want to know who else is in that group. And so you click this plus sign and you can add in that information. And you can click that plus sign for as many people as there are in the group. And now you're ready to collect data about that visitor. And one last note. The time enter is very important. The time they enter the exhibit or enter the experience is very important. The rest of all of this information can actually be added after you've collected the element info on your visitor. So don't feel you have to rush to get in all of this visitor characteristic info while the person is walking through the door. So now it's time to collect element info. So where they're going in the exhibit or experience. And then you would click on element info down here. So what you see is this page. All right, but as you see, there's no elements down the page here. That's because if you remember, we divided the elements up into groups. There's these sections of the museum, 1800 to 1830, 1830 to Civil War, 1866 to 1910. So you need to click on that. When you click on that, in this case we clicked on 1800 to 1830, we got our log cabin as well as downtime. If you remember, downtime is an ongoing element or an element that shows up in every group. So now that you've clicked 1800 to 1830 and you've got your log cabin, your downtime, any other elements that you may have attached to that group, you hit start time. You start turning on and off those behaviors that you are observing the visitor doing, and you hang out and wait until the visitor moves on to the next element. A few things to point out on this page, because the page is now the same for every element you go to throughout your entire project. The first thing is to point out this first and add element visit. This is for if your visitor spends 17 seconds at the log cabin, then they leave the log cabin, they check that maybe they go to downtime or they go to some other element, and then they come back to the log cabin. So again, they have physically moved away and then they come back. When they come back, you click on log cabin again, but of course you already get this information that you collected the first time. You don't want to override that information. If you click Add Element Visit, you suddenly get a blank page for log cabin. It also means that and then you can hit start collecting everything. It also means that in the data that you export, you can see the path this visitor took, that they first stopped at the log cabin, then they went away from it to do something else, and then they came back. And so you can see if there's actually a pattern and if that's happening among your visitors. Add element visit is different from number of rounds of exhibit activity. And that should actually say number of rounds of element activity. This is purposefully, again, for interactives. Every now and then, a visitor goes up to an interactive, they start it, or they encounter it halfway through, it ends, and they actually do another round of it. They start over and they do the whole thing, or they stay until they reach the point that they entered, if it's a video. But they actually start from the beginning. And in the case of interactives, particularly at children's museums, which is what I designed this for in the when I was first thinking about it, you can have children that come up, go through an activity, and then want to play it again. And so that's why we have number of rounds of exhibit activity. Most often you are not using this, but it's there if you need it. So let's go to the next page. Now you saw before that we have map down here. And if you remember from the Web Utility Administrator video, I uploaded a map. Now, if you look very closely, you'll see this map does not fit our exhibit. It was a map I had handy for purposes of describing this process to you. But had I clicked this one, which I would know would be for the anti-slavery sign, I could go from visitor info to map, click on where I know is my anti-slavery sign, and I would be taken to the page for the anti-slavery sign. So again, there are two ways to get at your elements. You can either click on your group and go to your element, and the elements appear, or you can go to the map and the elements appear. Now what happens when you're done and you want to get these tracks off your iPad? Now again, I want to echo the fact that you do not need Wi-Fi in order to collect your data. Again, you don't need Wi-Fi to collect your data. You do need a Wi-Fi connection to get your data off the tablet, and that's what we're going to describe right now. So you're done with your data collection for the day. You go to Manage Tracks. And there's a few things here. You can see all of the projects that are on your tablet right now, and all of this is grayed out. And you notice that there's no tracks here. Do not panic. You actually need to click on which project you're doing. So we clicked on Atlanta History Museum, and suddenly there's a track that I put in to show you. Now you need to then click the track in order to get everything else to light up. So you want to collect this track. The reason you have to click on it is so you're not sending, if you store your tracks on here, you don't have to send yourself all of the tracks every single day for the duration of your project. You can just highlight the ones that you did that day. Now there's two different types here. There's one called one line and one called classic. 99.9% of the time you want one line. That means that your data, your track, will be exported as an Excel spreadsheet or in an Excel spreadsheet along one whole line. Classic is another way to set up the data in which your visitor info is on one line and where they went is on another. We separated them out in the beginning to make the Excel spreadsheet column distance a lot shorter. But then we realized that that made it more difficult if you wanted to export your Excel spreadsheet to SPSS or SAS or some other quantitative data analysis software. So we give you a choice. And you can certainly send the track both ways. So we've decided we want to do one line. We need to export the track. You would click Export Track. And you have a choice. You can send it as an email to yourself or as a file. If you send it as an email, you get the track is being sent as an email. You notice here it's sent as a CSV. That's an Excel spreadsheet. It will appear as an Excel spreadsheet, but when you'll just need to resave it on your computer as a .xcl rather than CSV. You can also send it to yourself as a file. If you do that, it ends up in your iTunes, again as a CSV. And again, you would open it up from iTunes, you would open it as an Excel spreadsheet and then resave it as a .xcl. That brings us to the end of describing how TrackNTime works on the actual iPad, on the actual tablet. In the next week, it is currently late May, in the next week I will put up a similar video for those using Google products such as Samsung, Motorola tablets, as TrackNTime works exactly the same, but physically looks a little bit different. Again, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please contact me at oberg@obergresearch.com or visit our website, obergresearch.com.